you homeschool multiple kids in multiple grades while not losing your mind? I'm a homeschool mom of 9, 2 have graduated, 7 are still going through it, and I work full-time. If you follow me, I break down child development into 3 different categories. The acid trip years, which are 0 to 6, we are just taking care of a tiny drunk human. 7 to 12, which are the literal years, where everything is so literal. And then 13 to 18, which is the takeover years, where they slowly take over the responsibility of themselves. Now, the dynamic of how they learn during this time, I actually break down into 4 segments, where I take the literal years and I break that into 2. For 0 to 6, the way that their brains are developing, I don't want to break their imagination by trying to get them to sit down and do some strategized curriculum when their brains are not there. There's a lot of research about the difference between play-based education and any kind of book learning education prior to the age of 7. The countries that are extremely successful when it comes to long-term education of their citizens are doing all play-based education until they're about 7 years old. At that point, they prioritize learning reading, but before that, all reading is done just by reading along with things, reading along with you, not a this is this vowel sound, this is that, you need to do this, you need to do that, drill and kill kind of learning. Because what is going to kill the love of a story more than trying to learn something prior to your brain being ready for it? And as with pretty much everything in life, just because we can doesn't mean we should. I read a great book like 15 years ago called Better Late Than Early, and it was talking about how when we wait until a brain is ready to be able to learn something, you can go exponentially farther with it than when you do it prior, because when you're doing it prior, it seems like you're not good at it because your brain's just not ready to do it. So if you just wait until they're ready, then they can. And they enjoy the process a whole lot more. I've had 2 kids that were earlier readers. One was naturally an earlier reader. The other one was so natural, he actually taught himself to read just by reading alongside me. Both of those kids really separate out the difference between reading for pleasure and reading because they have to, where my other kids just read either way, there's no difference. I also do a lot more mental math, the math you can do without paper, the math that's going to come up in daily life, that kind of stuff. So this means that I don't use preschool curriculums, kindergarten curriculums, none of that. It's very much a Montessori, Waldorf-style education. Now moving on to the literal years, I separate this out into 7 and 10, and then 11 to 14, because there's a little bit of overlap. 7 to 10 is where we're working on becoming a very good fluent reader and comprehension skills. I'm building as much framework as I can around the idea of the love of the story, a love of learning what is in a story, comprehension, discussion. I'm not working on a lot of facts-based learning, and I know literal learners love facts, but I'm trying to continue that imagination segment that they really had heavy during that 0 to 6. I want to continue that imagination before it kind of fades off into the very firm literal years. And my biggest piece of advice is don't move on to chapter books too soon. Short story-based picture books are phenomenal for teaching creativity, how to tell a story, the beginning, middle, and end of something, being able to figure out the arc and then the conclusion, and they do it with the least amount of words possible. Which means you can consume a ton of different stories really quickly and have a lot of things to be able to discuss in those storylines, both from the education perspective and from the EQ perspective, because you're helping them put a whole bunch of words to emotions that they haven't had before. EQ and IQ are equally as important. 7, 8, and 9 are still very much literal years, but there are a lot of understanding about what emotions are happening that they have kind of residual from that 0 to 6 year. And so when you put more words around their EQ, you're going to be setting them up for success while they get through their teenage years. Helping them understand and navigate emotions earlier is actually going to help them long term when their brains kind of get mushy through puberty and pre-puberty. So all of the 7 to 10-year-olds in my house are on the same curriculum. Reading a lot of stories, a lot of audiobooks, a lot of discussion. And somewhere during the 7 to 10 year, you're going to see that they're going to need to be more challenged in their math. And you'll know they're ready when they're fluent in mental math. When you just throw something mental math at them and they get it instantly, you know that they're ready to be challenged. And this is when I implement teaching textbooks. Teaching textbooks technically doesn't start till 3rd grade, but I consider that level, like that's level 1. And when they're ready for it, they're ready for it. Put it in front of them. And if they are struggling to be able to get it done, then maybe they're not ready. But if they're doing it pretty well, it's basically they sit through a tutorial, then they answer some questions. And once they're done with that, they're done with their lesson for the day. It's all self-grading. It will save you your sanity and it will save you a bunch of time. I use it all the way through high school. It may not be the most challenging math program out there, but if your kid's not going to be a mathematician, it's going to do the job. And if your child needs something more challenging, wait until they're done with all of it and then give them something more challenging. Honestly, if I was going to enrich it with anything, I enrich it with Life of Fred, which is a textbook-like style, but it's a reading book, so you get reading done while you're learning about math because it's teaching you more about math concepts. And I see that kids who really need more challenging math actually need more of the roots of math as opposed to understanding the math that they're doing. Basically, teaching them the language of math, and that's what I like about Life of Fred. I used that with my dysgraphic son, and it taught him a lot. Not dysgraphic, dyscalculia. He also did dyslexia. That was a fun education for both of us. Now, 11 to 14-year-olds are going to need a lot more content because their brains are ready for it. They're ready to start to understand more facts, put more framework on timelines, understand the concept of time, because up until this point, they really don't understand the lineage of time. It's really hard for a child that's 10 or under to understand decades and centuries and so on and so forth, but you'll see right around the age of 11, it starts to make more sense. It's like they lived through enough years that they can start to understand, I bet there were a whole bunch of years before me. So now when you put timelines and history into their brains, they already know a lot of the people because you've been doing biographies up until this point. Now you're just putting the framework around when they all lived, the wars that were happening, so on and so forth. I use Mystery of History for this. You can pick your own history curriculum. And at this point, they're a fluent reader. They're doing a lesson a day, and then they come to me and we discuss the questions. Same thing with science. At this point, they're doing one science lesson a day, and they're coming to me to discuss it. This is also the point that you start giving them more chapter-based books. You'll see a day during the literal years that their imagination really has waned off, and now you need to give them something that they need to be forced into their imagination. And you want to keep forcing them into their imagination because that's how you're going to continue their imagination for the rest of their life, which chapter books do a really good job of. This is also the point in time that you want to go and encourage them to do a whole bunch of activities on things that they like. Find out what they like, find out what they don't like. Encourage them to fail at things, which means, oh, you want to try that? Go ahead and try that. You might be bad at it, but you might be good at it. Maybe you'll push through, maybe you won't. Give them the freedom to be able to explore their talents. Which again is why I keep the education portion to a pretty bare minimum. I also give them flexibility. You can do your schoolwork first thing in the morning, you can do it last thing at night. It's up to you. As long as you get it done, you get it done. And depending on the child, it doesn't work as well with like ADHD kids, but it will work with other kids who are more traditional learners, is that I will give them exactly what they need to get done on a Monday, and I really won't talk to them about it until Friday. And typically, they're on point with what they need to get done. My ADHDers are much better when it comes to routine. They thrive in routine. So as long as they know what they need to get done each and every day, then that helps their executive functioning skills. If they're struggling to stay on point, but you think that's going to be something that works for them, set a reminder in their iPads. The reminders in iPads are phenomenal. I just think that's a great tool for anybody who struggles with ADHD at all, but it's a good thing to implement earlier in their life so that they can understand that this is a tool to help them thrive and not a crutch that's going to hold them back. 14 to 18, this is when they need to be doing the vast majority of what they're learning by themselves. You want them on their own as much as possible because you want to start mimicking the world that they're going to live in forever. And you want to do it in a way that you are still there as their safety net to make sure that wherever they're struggling, that you can help lift them up so that they can get to that true self-education standpoint. I see a lot of kids who go off to college who didn't have this safety net year where they actually had somebody who was telling them, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. And then when they got to college, they didn't have that person telling them, you need to do this, and they were struggling to figure out how to do that. So those 4 years of 14 to 18, I'm giving you as many opportunities to fail in a safe place with a safety net so that you understand when you hit college, you'll be able to thrive. You'll not only have the muscle memory of knowing how to be able to accomplish something, but you will have the endurance and the perseverance to know how to get to the next point. And if you hit any kind of struggles along the way, you know how to be able to find the information out to accomplish whatever your goal is. One of the things that I am most proud about my adult children is the fact that they will persevere and endure through pretty much anything. They are diligent workers. When they put their mind to something, they will get it done. One of my sons works for a family friend, and he's actually leaving that job so that he can pursue his education, and his boss is grieving. He's like, I'm not going to be able to replace him. He is the most diligent worker. I don't have to worry about him. He gets what needs to get done. He is good at what he does. I'm not going to be able to replace him. And I credit that not only to his own personality, but that he was given a whole lot of opportunities to fail and figure out how to get to what he needs to get done. He had the reins on a lot of his education. We customized it to him. My other son is the same. He gets a ton of accolades at work for the fact that he is diligent and does what he needs to get done. And I credit a lot of that to the amount of free time that they were able to go and explore and learn and play. Because they formed their own missions and they figured out how to complete them on their own. Therefore, they knew how to finish a job. Now, within all these 4 different stages, those kids in those stages, they get grouped together, rather than separating out by grade like 1st grade or 2nd grade or blah, blah, blah. Basically, you're in one of those 4 levels, which it makes it easier for me and easier for them because they usually have a buddy around their age. And if you go here, you'll find a list of all the curriculums that I recommend. And I hope all of this makes your journey much easier.